Hello everyone. Let's quickly go through important properties of AG cluster in this session. But before understanding AG properties, I want to first quickly go through synchronization process in availability group. Here we have primary and secondary servers in always-on cluster. The synchronization process starts with the start of transactions in primary. Transaction logs are first moved to log cache to be flashed to transaction log file on hard drive. We call this as log flash here. At the same time, to move transaction logs to secondary, the logs are captured and placed to sending queue. Then the messages are sent across the wire to the respective secondary replica. Then the secondary replica receives the transaction logs and caches them. After caching, the log is flashed on the secondary replica for hardening. One important point here. After hardening, data loss is avoided. After the log flash, an acknowledgement is sent back to primary replica. After getting the acknowledgement, primary commits transaction. In the meantime, there are also redo threads which apply synchronized transaction logs to data pages and flash them to hard drive in secondary replica. We call this as a redo process, okay? So this is overall synchronization process at high level. So let's start with synchronization modes in availability group. You configure this setting while creating availability group or while maintaining that, right? So you have two options, synchronous and asynchronous. What is this setting? In our example, we can see that primary is waiting acknowledgement from the secondary before committing transaction, right? Transaction is not committed until data is hardened to secondary. This is called synchronous mode. Under synchronous mode, before committing transactions, asynchronous commit primary replica waits for synchronous commit secondary replica to acknowledge the data, okay? After that, it commits a transaction. So you can see here the path of synchronization. If network is slow or secondary is slow in hardening transaction log, primary takes time to commit transaction, right? As a result, you experience latency in your queries in primary. Therefore, if you choose synchronous mode, you should make sure that you have high-speed network and your secondary is fast enough to process transaction logs. If your secondary is located very far, okay, in different subnets network, right, in DR side, and you experience network latency, you should configure another mode, asynchronous mode. Under asynchronous mode, primary does not wait for secondary. Instead, after flashing data locally, it just commits transaction. It does not wait. Data synchronization is done asynchronously in the background, okay? As you can see, in this case, network speed does not impact your transaction speed in primary. So, to summarize, while choosing synchronization mode, consider this flow, and if you have high latency in network or any bottleneck in secondary, choose asynchronous mode. Okay, regarding failover modes, it is very much simple. If you configured automatic failover, when primary goes down because of some outage, secondary becomes primary automatically. And application connections will be directed to this new primary, okay? If it is manual, this kind of automatic failover does not happen. Let's switch to readable secondary setting. Usually, both read and write queries go to primary, but this can give high load for primary. In this case, you can make secondary as readable secondary and configure read-only routing in primary. Okay? In this way, you can direct these read queries to secondary. As a result, you can decrease load in primary. Therefore, we need this readable secondary setting. There is also read intent only setting. Read intent only, okay? This setting also works with read-only routing. Only difference is that application in this case should specify application intent read-only. Okay, otherwise read-only routing does not work. Then seeding mode. Automatic seeding mode means that if you create any database in primary, that database automatically created also in secondary, and synchronization starts after that. If you do not use automatic seeding, you should take backup and restore manually in secondary. Let's also discuss about session timeout and endpoint. Endpoint is synchronization port where synchronization related data is exchanged, okay, between replicas. In my case, you can see it is at port 5022, but you can customize this. These endpoints do not create sessions every time they want to exchange data, okay, because every time creating session is very much costly. Instead, these endpoints try to keep session alive, and the timeout for these sessions is 10 seconds. Depending on your local network latency, you can adjust this timeout value. If you have high latency, right, you might often experience timeout. So you should increase in this case from 10 seconds to 20 seconds or 30 seconds. Okay. I hope that you understood the most important properties of AG cluster. There is also, you can see, database level health detection. Usually SQL Server takes into account the overall server level health. Okay. If server goes down, then SQL Server triggers failover. But if you want also database level health, for example, if some of your database become offline, then if you want to trigger automatic failover in this case, you can just choose this one. Okay. Then per database level DTC support setting, right? Usually we do not choose this, but if you want, you can just also set this one. Okay. So other properties we will speak about, like contained, right? Require synchronized secondaries to commit, right? These settings are usually not so much important, but we will speak about this in the next sessions. Do not worry. Okay. So now backup preferences. I want to speak about this backup preference while setting backup for availability group. Okay. We will definitely come back to this. Then permissions. You can see I did not set permissions, but you can, if you want to set, you can set it. Then read-only routing, right? We already spoke about read-only routing, right? How read-only routing works. But if you want to set it, you can set it here. I don't want to set it now. I have a dedicated session for this read-only routing, okay, in the next sessions. So I hope that you found this session useful. Thank you.